Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into it, excavating the incredibly short, but, well, explosive career of Jean-Michel Basquiat.
Yeah, an artist whose style, I mean, you know it when you see it. His influence is still reshaping contemporary art, contemporary culture even.
In his main professional career,
Yeah.
barely a decade long. It's quite something.
It really is. And our mission today really is to try and cut through some of the smoke, the mythology around Basquiat.
Okay.
Because the sources, they really show this tension between the media loved this wild, untutored genius idea and the actual man who was fiercely smart, very ambitious.
Right.
So we're tracing his visual language, that powerful critique of race and power in his work, and yeah, his huge lasting impact.
And the scale, I mean, the numbers alone are just staggering. He died at 27.
So young.
Teched, over 2,000 works into maybe 7 years of intense activity. And then you have that 1982 painting, Untitled,
Insult, yeah.
selling for $110.5 million in 2017, which, at the time, that was the record, the highest price ever paid for an American artist's work.
Just incredible figures.
Incredible. So clearly, someone commanding those prices isn't just some, accidental talent.
Right.
But even now, if you talk about Basquiat, there's still this one narrative that kind of sticks, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
This sort of uneducated, almost uncivilized graffiti guy from the quote-unquote ghettos who just stumbled into Soho galleries.
Right. And that narrative, well, it couldn't be more wrong. And it's important to unpack why that story was so, let's say, convenient for the art market at the time.
Okay, so what's the reality?
The reality. He was born in Brooklyn, 1960, solid middle-class family. His father was Haitian, his mother Puerto Rican, and he had private schooling for a lot of his childhood.
So not just educated, but the sources say he was genuinely gifted, even as a really young kid.
Oh, profoundly gifted. Reading and writing by age 4. Fluent in 3 languages growing up, English, Spanish, and French. And his mother was just pivotal, really encouraged his art, took him to see major works like Picasso's Guernica, enrolled him as a junior member at the Brooklyn Museum.
So that artistic foundation was there from the very beginning, deep roots. But there was also a physical event, a trauma, that really shaped his visual style early on.
Yes, and this is absolutely key context. 1968, he's 7 years old, hit by a car. It was serious. He had to have his spleen removed.
Right.
And while he's recovering, his mother gives him a copy of Gray's Anatomy, the classic medical textbook.
Okay.
And he apparently memorized parts of it. So suddenly, this dense scientific text becomes this core source material. It directly feeds into those recurring motifs you see everywhere in his work, the skulls, the bones, the anatomical charts.
Fascinating. So you have this multilingual, privately educated kid, absorbs Gray's Anatomy, then leaves home at 17, is living rough for a bit, and by 1978, he's making his mark on the city walls with L. Diaz. They form SAMO.
Yeah, that leap is interesting, isn't it? From that background to street art. SAM, which stood for same old shit, by the way.
Right.
That was the bridge. And this is where the graffiti artist label starts getting sticky. But their work, you have to understand, was really different from typical graffiti tagging.
How so?
Well, they weren't just bombing trains with their names or marking territory. They were writing these poetic, cryptic, often really satirical or political statements on walls in Soho and downtown.
Like little public poems or something?
Kind of, yeah. Philosophical provocations, things like SAMO as an end to mind-wash religion, that kind of stuff. They were using the city as a bulletin board for ideas.
Gotcha.
So when Basquiat went solo around 1980, he very pointedly rejected being called an ex-graffiti artist. He felt it was reductive, even racist, a way to box him in, tie him back to that uneducated myth, and ignore the complexity of what he was already doing.
That makes sense. It shows how deliberate he was,
Right.
Even then. Okay, so let's track that move from the street SAMO into the studio proper. He's selling painted postcards, famously sells one to Andy Warhol.
Right on the street.
And then suddenly he's painting. But because he doesn't have money for canvas, he's using anything, old doors, window frames, bits of wood. And he gets picked up fast as a key figure in Neo-Expressionism.
Yeah, he basically translated that raw street energy into a very conscious, very layered studio practice.
Yeah.
And he was, technically brilliant, a master colorist.
How so?
Just layering these undiluted primary colors, using everything, oil sticks, spray paint, acrylics, crayons, whatever was at hand. But the real genius, I think, wasn't just the color or the energy, it was the synthesis. The way he pulled things together.
This is what the sources call his sampling method.
Exactly. Think about early hip-hop DJs, Grandmaster Flash, Africa Bambaataa, they weren't creating sounds from scratch. They were taking existing records, James Brown, Kraftwerk, cutting up those breaks, those samples, layering them to create something totally new. Basquiat did that visually. He'd sample the primitivism of Picasso, the collage feel of Rauschenberg, maybe pull from African masks, but then he'd instantly fuse it with references to his own Haitian and Puerto Rican background, anatomy, jazz.
So his studio wasn't this quiet contemplative space.
Right.
It sounds more like information overload.
Yeah.
Music blasting, TV on, books everywhere.
Pretty much a total sensory environment. He absorbed everything. High art, low art, bebop, cartoons, poetry, Kerouac, Ginsberg, brand names, history books. It all went into the mix.
Which explains why the paintings feel so dense, these visual collages.
Exactly. And that connects to maybe his most famous technique, the crossing out of words, the pentimento.
Right, which is funny because pentimento usually means something the artist tried to hide, but is showing through. He does it on purpose. Why cross out a word you want people to see?
His own explanation is just brilliant, really. He said something like, I cross out words so you will see them more. The fact that they're obscured, crossed out, actually draws your eye. It makes you want to read them, makes you work for it. It creates this visual static, this friction.
So the words aren't just labels, they're active parts of the painting's rhythm.
Precisely. Active, contested parts.
Okay, so that focus on language, on friction, that leads us right into the core motivation, doesn't it? It wasn't just about showing off how much he knew. It was about tackling that ethnic imbalance in the art world, depicting the Black experience in a space that had historically ignored or tokenized it.
100%. His symbols are weapons, in a way. Tools for social critique. Think about his signature crown, that three-pointed crown you see everywhere.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a cool logo. He was deliberately using it to challenge traditional European symbols of power, of royalty. And who did he crown? He crowned Black figures, athletes like his hero Hank Aaron, musicians like Charlie Parker, writers, sometimes himself. He was elevating them to royalty, to sainthood, right there on the canvas.
Giving them the status the history books often denied them.
Exactly. And the skulls, too. Yes, they came from Grey's Anatomy, but they also carried this heavy historical weight. They evoke, as some sources point out, generations of enslaved people, Haitian voodoo imagery, and they're an ironic nod to those African masks Picasso and others had appropriated without credit for so long.
Yeah.
He's taking that back.
Reclaiming it.
Yeah.
He even used the copyright symbol, didn't he? That little E.
Yeah, which is just genius. It's partly this ironic jab at the whole commercial art system, the ownership thing, but it's also him asserting authorship. Like, this is mine, this experience, this image, I own it.
Which is so powerful, especially given the context. Because despite his smarts, his ambition, his, meteoric success selling out his first solo show in '82, he never really escaped the prejudice he was railing against.
That's the crushing irony, isn't it? He becomes this art world superstar, feted, selling paintings for fortunes, but he's still subjected to the same old racism. The myth of the wild child kind of trapped him, even as he became successful.
And the sources list some really, frankly, appalling examples of this.
They really do. I mean, picture this. He's at the height of his fame, leaves his own star-studded gallery opening, and he can't get a taxi because he's Black.
Still. Even then,
being followed by security in fancy stores, being turned away from restaurants. One source mentions him being stopped at an airport, questioned for 2 hours about how a Black man with dreadlocks could possibly afford a first-class plane ticket.
wow. It makes you think how much of that frantic energy, that incredibly compressed output, was maybe fueled by just sheer rage and in this constant need to prove himself to a world that refused to see past his skin color.
I think that urgency is undeniable. It really defined his pace, especially around 1982 when things just exploded for him. He gets that studio from the gallerist Anina Nose.
Right, in the basement of her gallery.
Which immediately fed into that sensationalized narrative. The gallery owner keeping this wild Black runaway chained in the basement, churning out masterpieces.
God, that's awful. And his response to that was perfect, wasn't it?
It summed it all up. He said something like, if I was white, they would call me an artist in residence instead of selling that other stuff. Just perfectly highlighting that double standard, the racial coding applied to him versus, say, a white contemporary like Julian Schnabel.
And it's around this time, soon after that first solo success, that the famous collaboration with Andy Warhol begins. That story is legendary, too. Basquiat has lunch with Warhol.
Arranged by their dealer, yeah.
Rushes home, paints that double portrait, Dos Cabezas, and delivers it back to Warhol, still wet, just hours later.
Yeah, talk about making an impression. That move kind of sealed the deal. And the relationship It was symbiotic, really. Warhol's star had faded a bit. He needed that injection of youthful energy, that street cred Basquiat had.
And Basquiat.
Basquiat, despite being the hot new thing, he wanted, maybe needed, that access Warhol represented. Access to the collectors, the museums, the sort of establishment legitimacy that he simultaneously critiqued and perhaps craved.
They made some amazing pieces together, those collaborations where you can see both their styles battling it out. But the joint show they had in 1985, critical disaster.
I know, it got savaged. Critics just hated it. Said Basquiat was just like Warhol's accessory. The absolute worst blow, the one that really stung Basquiat personally, was one critic calling him Warhol's mascot.
Ouch.
Oh.
Mascot. Given everything he was fighting against.
Exactly. Just completely negated his independence, his intellect, everything he'd fought to establish. It basically reinforced the very stereotypes he was trying to dismantle.
So that was the end of the close collaboration.
Pretty much. He distanced himself from Warhol after that. The sources suggest there was still, real affection there, maybe respect. Warhol apparently tried to help him with his escalating drug problems, but that mascot comment seems to have been a breaking point.
And then, just a couple of years later, 1987, Warhol dies suddenly. That must have hit him hard.
Devastatingly hard. Warhol, for all the complexities, was a mentor figure, a protector in some ways within that art world. His death left Basquiat increasingly isolated. His depression deepened, his heroin addiction spiraled.
And he died just a year later, 1988, still only 27.
27?
Yeah.
But leaving behind, what was it, over 2,000 paintings and drawings, an entire life's work crammed into less than a decade. Just unbelievable productivity.
So when we look back now, what does it all mean today? That $110.5 million is one measure, sure. But his real relevance seems much broader, much deeper than just auction prices.
Oh, his cultural shadows events. Look at hip-hop, for starters. He wasn't just adjacent to it. He was part of that early downtown scene. He starred in the film Downtown 81. He even produced a classic early hip-hop track, Beat Bop, in 83.
Right, Rammel versus K-Rob.
Exactly. And today, Jay-Z, Kanye, countless others constantly reference him, drop his name, hang his paintings. He's become this symbol of artistic genius, black excellence, and wealth and status, too.
And beyond music, you see his style everywhere. Fashion, sports.
Totally. That crown especially, it's iconic. You see it on streetwear, high fashion lines. The Brooklyn Nets even had uniforms and a court design inspired by his work. It resonates.
But maybe the most powerful legacy, the sources suggest, is in education.
I think so. His work, his themes, race, identity, power, history, they're being taught in schools now, especially in Brooklyn. He shows kids, that their own background, their own heritage, whether it's Haitian, Puerto Rican, Ecuadorian, whatever, that is valid material for art. That social commentary is art.
It validates self-expression as high art, regardless of where it comes from. And that quote that his work is as relevant now as it was 40 years ago, that really lands, doesn't it? Shows how little some core issues have changed.
Sadly, yes. He was absolutely relentless, driven by this need to create, this refusal to, as he put it, dilute the message. He poured a lifetime into those 7 or 8 years. Talent, ambition, anger, charisma, it was all in there.
That fire, that urgency, you really can't separate it from the art itself. Which brings us to a final thought, something for you, the listener, to chew on based on what we've discussed.
Yeah.
Basquiat seemed to crave recognition, legitimacy from the critics, the curators, the art historians, and the very establishment that often resisted or misunderstood him.
Yeah.
So thinking about that desire, how would he view his legacy now? Where his paintings fetch over $100 million, confirming his status in one way, but they're almost all locked away in private collections. Very few are easily accessible for the public for study. What's that kind of astronomical market validation worth if the work itself, the message he fought so hard to get out there, is largely hidden from view? Something to think about.